Hey, thanks for coming and attending our panel. You're at SMPTE Presents AI as Ally, Enhancing Human Creativity in Media Production. My name's Andy Beach. I'm former CTO of Media and Entertainment at Microsoft. I looked after technical strategy there, and now I'm out in the free world. I'm talking a lot these days about the intersection of media and AI and trying to hopefully brings a realistic lens to it. Somebody asked me if I was an AI evangelist now, and I don't think I'm an AI evangelist because I'm way too realistic for that. I am an optimist, and I do believe that AI has a lot of positive possibilities for us, but it takes a lot of intervention. It takes action on all of our parts in order to make that happen. This is also not just a panel that's here. We're actually recording this, and it's going to be part of a live podcast that SMPTE's putting together with me called Future Frames. So look for that on the SMPTE website in the coming weeks as we begin to get the production up and running and get the pieces out there. Before I dive in and start with the overall pieces, I did want to introduce everybody that's on the panel with us. So we'll start with Mariana. Who are you and what are you doing, and what are your early thoughts? What are you using AI for today already as you introduce yourself?
Woo, exactly. What an introduction. Hi everybody. Mariana Cunha Costa. Until a month ago, I'm now ex-Technicolor SVP of virtual production, and I was doing
Did something happen there?
Yes. It only imploded. And now TVDs, today TVDs, that only happened a month ago. But I've always been into the, future forward of technology. And of course, Technicolor, we were doing a lot of early iterations of previs as well as performance capture and using machine learning and using computer vision and AI for our workflows. And what was the other question? What am I using AI?
What are you using AI for?
Well, today using AI for, creating content faster and easier with, Gen AI tools, doing things like previs or audio to face with meta humans.
I used it in January to create a resume because I hadn't had a resume in 12 years.
There you go. Exactly.
Just a tip. Doug Dalton. Doug is, you will also hear me call him producer Doug. But you're producing the podcast Future Frames, but you're also a working independent producer in the field. Who are you? What are you doing? And how are you using AI?
Thanks, Andy. So, my background is I worked in, corporate theater and did a lot of production for, probably our most high profile work was we did all the early streaming for Google and Salesforce as they went out to the public and live streaming. So if you remember President Obama's fireside chats, I was a TD on that team, helped bring that to life, and I've since worked in features and all kinds of different media. As far as what I'm using AI for today, I'm actually using it to help me build out product resource documents, other kinds of documents that I need to help stand up the show, do other things along the way to help build out our show, help build our sales documents, basically talking to it, figuring it out, bringing it back together into a usable document that I can then distribute out to the partners.
And last but not least, the only CTO that we have on the panel today, we've got Tim Porter from ModTech Labs.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim Porter. I'm the CTO at ModTech Labs, and what we do is automated workflows, content creation, optimization, conversion, and decent amount of AI integration. And so, talking about AI and use of AI, we have generative throughout many parts of our process, everything from image to 3D. We also have image generation. We have 2.5D plate systems that use machine learning and artificial intelligence throughout the entire process of generating that. And I've actually been using machine learning since, if I remember right, 2012, when I was working at a game studio, and we were doing a decent amount of what was called BI at the time. And so business intelligence, trying to figure out what game was interesting, what users were going to do, and what they were most likely going to be interested in doing as we move forward. So that's been something that's kind of been in my blood for a considerable amount of time, helping train, build, and shape the world of where machine learning is going for a lot of us. And I'd like to make tools that make it to where people can actually enjoy doing AI and machine learning.
Tim, I have a quick question I want to jump in because you said something that I feel like I dealt with a lot, over the years, which are the misconceptions. What's your favorite misconception about AI? Mine was always that it got invented in like November of 2021 when ChatGPT launched, and we never had it before then. So what is your favorite misconception, or what sticks with you as the one that's annoying?
I'm going to go with everybody's going to get replaced by it. AI is an assistance. It's a tool. It can help. It is something that takes away the drudgery. And for me, since my background, and we talked about it a little bit, I was a technical artist and a pipeline TD. It's something that I can make it to where I can hand off solutions to artists where they don't have to do the stupid stuff. I really hated it when my team would go, yeah, but then I got to exploit this thing and I got to put it in here. And none of that makes the art prettier or better. It just works better with the tools and the systems. Why don't we have that throughout? And it was always because it was kind of difficult to get AI and all of these objects and all of these things done. But with that enablement, now that it becomes a lot easier to go ahead and integrate, it's something that we can make it to where artists can just kind of love what they do.
Mariana, was that your experience with AI as well?
Oh yeah, the biggest misconception that's going to take all of our jobs. But also, I love how all these like young AI startups think that Hollywood hasn't implemented any of it into their pipelines, and they think that Hollywood's just going to fall into pieces because they haven't adopted AI.
That one is adorable. Yeah, no, I wrote recently, I wrote a piece, which by the way, there's nothing more refreshing than leaving a job and getting to write all the things that lawyers wouldn't let you write about. But one of the things I said very early on after I left was that like AI is not trying to replace you. A studio exec is trying to weaponize AI against you. And that's the thing you're feeling. So you're feeling shitty business practices. You're not feeling AI as the problem there. And I think if we think of it and frame it in that way, we can also use it as part of what we're doing. And I think that's what all of us are here collectively trying to find the way forward with those pieces. Doug, Tim had called out sort of taking off the grunt work, in the process of doing production. Where are you trying to use AI already? And then where are you seeing the value? And call out a couple names. I'd love for people to hear the things that they should be trying out as part of it.
Yeah. So obviously the obvious ones are Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, the engines that are already out there. And I use them, as I said, not just for standing up documents and documentation throughout our process, but also for some creative projects I'm working on as a kind of a writer's room for myself, throwing out an idea, doing research, saying, hey, I want to this is an example. I want to do something in the Roman gladiator times. Tell me go out and find out all I can about what kind of sandals they wore back in the day. I mean, that's a silly example, but that's exactly the kind of thing that's really powerful. And to speak to misconceptions, aside from the AI as Skynet, which is what everybody's afraid of, but it's not true. The other thing that I see in misconception is you have a lot of creatives, particularly my friends who are in SAG, or Writers Guild, who think that it is going to replace the creative person. And I absolutely don't believe that that's the case. I think people can get past that and start to think of it as an asset and a tool that essentially is a force multiplier for you, that makes you smarter, gives you more resources to draw upon, and lets you iterate faster and cleaner. That's what we have to be thinking about.
Yeah, excellent. I'll throw in, I think just in terms of obviously GPT and Claude have come up a lot in the areas I've played with. One that I've been a fan of for years is Descript, which I don't know if folks are familiar with in the audience, but think of it as like a word processor that's actually a video editor. Dump a whole video into it. It gives you a transcript and you can go through and edit the transcript and take out the sections you don't want. And then it just cuts the video down for all of those pieces. And great service, super easy to use, all web-based, like wildly simple, really.
And just some really crazy stuff too. Like, if you, like, everybody's had this experience, you're recording something, you rap, the person comes back and says, or their handler comes back and says, hey, Joe said potato there, but he really meant to say tomato. Well, within Descript, you can actually go find that in the transcript. You can change the word, and it will take the person's voice clone and replace the word tomato with potato, or whichever flip I set, right? So you can correct it. And of course, you're not going to do that by default without getting sign off from the talent, right? But you have that opportunity to fix something and replace their actual intent and replace a mistake with their actual intent. And that's the kind of stuff that's really going to change the way people think about production.
Mariana, on the virtual production side, are there AI specific tools? I know there's like a lot of AI just infused into the workflow period when you're dealing with that kind of world, but are there things that you've seen that have been coming around for the last couple of years that stand out as like things that people should know about or try to play with?
Yeah, I haven't played around with it, but there's a new AI-assisted virtual camera where you can tell it exactly just by drawing a curve where it should go. Yeah, exactly. And what kind of offsets it should be doing. I'm going to test
really
it
nicely.
pretty soon. I've also been working with Stability AI with their new Dream Studio. And that's really interesting because, you know, you have your background and your character and your foreground. And if you start to replacing either, you know, the background or the character, depending on what you tell it to do, it'll assume things like the highlights or the contact shadows, which I think that's really interesting because you're not actually telling it to do that, but it's just inferring and doing it as well. And I've been doing a lot of, you know, audio to face with metahumans. And I think that's really interesting because like they're with the new 5.5, the things that you can do and really like the lip syncing and everything, you're able to create things so quickly. Like I've been doing a little short story that's now, you know, it could have taken maybe for like a month to do or more. And now it literally took me half an hour.
And I think that's part of the beauty of all of this is that it does allow you to go do, I find that even in the writing I'm doing, like, people have commented that like, God, you're writing a lot. And it's like, well, yeah, because I have like a researcher for me now and I have an editor. And, you know, before when I would send it to my friends for editorial, they'd like, it's great. And it's like, well, that's not feedback. Whereas GPT is much harsher when it gives me feedback. Trust me.
Well, that's one of the cool things that you can do as you start, particularly when you start to think about agentic AI and building these little helpers that have very specific tools. Like I was building one yesterday evening where I wanted it to give me really harsh feedback. I'm like, tear this thing apart, basically red team it for me and punch holes in it. And it's amazing what it can do and help you figure out, oh, there's a hole in my argument. Let me go figure out how to fill it.
You said the newest buzzword, but I want to get Tim's. And Tim, you're not allowed to just say your stuff, but what are the AI tools that are out there that like have caught your eye that people should be thinking about?
100%. Everybody, if you're not doing anything in scanning, Gaussian splats are great, NeRFs are great, and I'll just do that as a top thing. But where I look for when I'm going to go ahead and like, I have an idea, I'm not really sure what I need to work in, but I maybe need something that's like, you know, I need to be able to test it out and I need like an output from it for part of my production or pipeline or something like that. Go to Hugging Face, go to the spaces area and type in, I need whatever this thing is. I want to go ahead and do background extraction. I want to do that. And you probably aren't going to get like the newest one, but it's got like a cool UI. You can drag and drop your photo in and you can, you know, maybe if you're going to do like in painting, you're going to be able to paint and do all of this stuff. It's all right there in a browser. And so you can just like play with stuff. And let's be honest, 95% of building a pipeline or a process is like, okay, that kind of works together and it kind of plays together, but like I have to get an output to start with so that I can start doing that. And so that's where I spend if I'm looking for some brand new stuff. That's my playground.
Hugging Face is a great example, and even just going into it can be daunting. So it's great to know you can just sort of describe what you want to do and it'll start making the recommendations for it.
And that's brand new. So you can write that in there. And then if you want to work it into a workflow, there's a little 3-dot thing and you can go bring on-prem and it gives you either a Docker container or you can get the Git repo and it'll show you step by step how to build the Git repo. So if you're going to do something super dorky, you know, there's ways to do that.
So Doug had mentioned agentic workflows, and that's sort of the new AI buzzword that has been around. Tim, can you describe a little bit of that for us? Like, I know you guys work in agent-based workflows. Can you explain and sort of demystify what that is we're talking about?
Sure. So the biggest thing to look at when you're talking about an agent is that machine learning algorithms work better when they're specialized at tasks. So let's say in the example that you were talking about, I wanted to get really harsh feedback. I would go ahead and I would create a system whose entire job is to go ahead and maybe search the web to see, based off of what I inputted, what is a good style of writing that's on this. I'm going to maybe have another one that's going to go ahead and then search and see what is a good topic. Maybe my topic it's close, but it's off a little bit. And then maybe I'll have another machine learning algorithm whose entire job is to go ahead and then take a look at my specific writing style based on the initial analysis. That's not that. So you end up having up top this machine learning algorithm whose job is to be the boss. And then it goes down to each one of the different workers, and it continues up and down and up and down and up and down. And then when it gets to the end, then it provides back a very good salient solution, because each and every one of those machine learning algorithms are an expert in their field. But the thing that I would say is the new big toys is MPCs, or model context protocols, MCPs.
Okay. So tell us more about that.
MCP. So if anybody knows what an API or a command line is, this is a machine learning specified version. And so you can take all of the documentation for Unity, you can write it in the special markdown format, and you give it to a machine learning algorithm, and you go, hey, Gemini, why don't you go through and build me a house? And it'll just, and then put that all in there, and it literally controls Unity in the way that it knows based off of you giving the entire code and background and everything like that. You can also hand it APIs. You can hand it absolutely anything. But what this is, it's that context protocol. It's that middle ground between the agent that we talked about and then the actual interplay of any tool or any program that's already out there.
So, I mean, that's fascinating, because effectively you could put a prompt UI on anything at that point.
Yep.
Which is great, because like one of the big complaints, like, Unreal, I've described it as like trying to learn how to fly a space shuttle. It's like, it's great if you've got 10 years of your life to dedicate to figuring every little piece of it out. But this effectively would let you describe what you want and have it go do it. Is that your experience with Unreal? You laughed. Is that?
Yeah, because also when you're looking for something really simple to solve, you have to read like 20 pages of documentation, and you may not even get what you're actually looking for.
No, absolutely. Well, that's fascinating. And what was that again? The
model context protocol. So MCP.
All right. I'm gonna have to update. I thought agentic was the new hotness, but
no. Go out there. It's so amazing to watch these short videos where it's just like watching an automated tool, and all somebody wrote was a simple sentence.
So, question for you there.
Yeah.
So do you see things like Unity or Unreal or other tool sets, you being able to basically build your own way into it? So you're basically saying, this is the way I think about creating a metahuman or whatever. Now give me my own way into it. So you can kind of put an app layer on top of it.
So if you wanted to go ahead and build something, this is going to be more outside of it. So MCP is good with being able to control what is already built within the system. Now, that's not to say you couldn't extend an MCP to actually have the capabilities of a tool that you've also built within it. But what you're looking at that point is then automated workflows. And then that points back to the kind of tools that my team does, where we take a whole bunch of different machine learning algorithms or typical tools, and then we hook them together, and then boom, you end up having a metahuman that's out of that. But at this point in time, MCP's only focus is just that connection between the two. But I mean, that's future. Why wouldn't we do that? That's fun stuff.
As someone who used to code and got away from it, one of the things I've enjoyed the most is there are ideas that have been in my notebook for years and I haven't had time to create. And then I literally sit down and go, I want to do something in Python. I want to put it on a DigitalOcean droplet, and this is what I want to do. And I go back and forth the conversation to get to a PRD and like go build it. And I get to an MVP in, like you said, a half an hour rather than 4 weeks of work. So like, don't be afraid of these tools. Jump in and start playing with them.
In your very specific workflow, you could do that in like Flowise or LangGraph, like whatever makes you happy. And then as an agent, I have a specific one whose entire job is to go ahead and start a droplet for me. And then you have that flow, and it becomes non-deterministic at that point.
So could you be able to implement that at scale? Because one big issue of these tools sometimes is being able to deploy them at scale. So would you be able to do that?
There are currently thousands of MCPs that are already out there. So being able to take something like this, the only thing that is the limitation right now is human understanding of the power. I think at this point, our biggest weakness is, okay, well, if I give this to the system, where are my choke points? When you start to code, you need to be able to context flow. And that's a very difficult thing for developers to think about. You do have branches and things like that, but then how do we affect that? And then how do we make it to where we get consistent results? And so that's something that is currently getting better and better and better. And we saw that with GTP-04. If you saw, you could literally, if anybody hasn't played with GTP-04, super cool. I can go, I need 12 logos. I want them 3D, and it'll be the same exact 12 logos, and they're just in 3D. And so that's the kind of weakness that we have right now, and agents help a little bit with that. But this layering solution is just, it's brain numbing at this point. And I think somebody super crafty's got to like figure it out. I'll try, but I'm not there either.
Fascinating. I did want to, I mean, we've obviously been talking a lot about the practical applications, the pieces that want to go into it. One of the topics that have come up in a lot of the other panels I've been involved in has been sort of questions around, ethical AI in particular. And so I did want to at least acknowledge and bring a little bit into it. And Mariana, I'll sort of start with you of like, as you were working with it, you were working in Hollywood. A lot of the reaction we saw from there was concerns about whether their intellectual property was being, consumed by these models and being used to train it. Were there other problems with the ethics of the AI, or were there other issues around the data that were coming up that you were hearing about, as part of it? And maybe it's not. I'm just curious where someone who was working in the business, what was it you were hearing about, and what was it you were looking for? Like, was it something that was commonly part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think more than anything is just really misconceptions, and just because of the novelty of it all. Because at the end, it's not like, for example, at this big VFX studios, you've already been working with machine learning and with deep learning and with everything else. And that wasn't a problem. But now this is a problem because it's, okay, who owns it, right? Like the intellectual property. Is it the creator? Is it the tool? Is it the data set? Is it like who's training it, right? But then also legal. I mean, legal was such a blocker.
Yeah, I mean, they would literally, I know studios would have almost daily emails that went around. There was like, stop logging into this, like, and don't use your personal account, and don't upload company material on your personal accounts.
Correct. And it was something super simple, like just to do some first version of a previous test, just to see how, like, lifting, it was supposed to be an octopus, but we didn't need that octopus. We just needed to see like the character, the human character, lifting something, whatever it was that, accounted like for the octopus. And we were using ourselves with the Mocopi system from Sony that's like on your phone with us. And so there was no issue there, and just testing with this, AI motion capture systems on the phone, and they were giving us the results right away. And legal would not let us use that as a test version 1 for the client, where there was no, you need to put your phone and not disturb dog. and legal wouldn't let us use it, but and like the blockers there made absolutely no sense. So this is like part ethical, I guess, from terms of the clients. You need to rewrite the contracts because there's nothing in there related to the training, the data sets, the IP, the tools that you're using. I get that, but also legal. I don't know if it's fear from part of the lawyers that they're also going to end up losing their jobs if, so they have to appear a lot more important. Because in examples like this, where it was like such a simple thing that could have saved the client weeks, and we would have been actually, made the clients happier faster, and legal would just not let us do that. And so that to me, like, I feel like the biggest blockers is clients not really understanding it, and then legal making a bigger deal than it has to be, and not taking into account like what you've been doing forever. It's just you're changing the workflow and you're changing the tools, but it's not really changing the outcome on the contrary.
I mean, when I look at what a lawyer bills an hour and what a TD bills an hour, I know who I'd replace first. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Part of it. Doug, same question. I know you've been thinking a lot about ethical AI in this space. What are the thoughts? What are the pieces that you're hearing, and what are the things that you feel like are important for people to be thinking about as they go evaluate new things on Hugging Face or try a new tool out?
Well, I think the key point is studios and production houses are going to have to start thinking about having their own internal AI systems, right, where they control what is there, right? So to your point, going out and using an open, the standard off-the-shelf GPT, right? Is it going to train on the data you're putting in there, right? And that's a real problem, or it's a real issue. It's an exposure legally. So you're going to start to see production houses that are going to have to hire their own people, that are going to build out their own tool set, and that they can keep everything internal, work from that, know that they have control over the domain, whether that's putting their own assets into it, having that firewalled from the internet so those things don't get out, right? And the beauty of this is so much of this stuff. They just announced Llama 4, which is an open source model yesterday, I think is when it dropped. And, it's open source, so you don't have to go pay for the license. You have to pay for the technical talent that's going to stand it up inside your firewall. But then you can build your own agents that you control, right? And you can build your own workflows into them. You can build all this stuff into them. And that is like the core next step for people to start thinking about in terms of ethics, right? And then it's also going to be, how do you interact with your talent, both, the actors that you're working with, the sound artists, the Foley artists that you're working with, whoever they are that are creating the content and the elements that go into that. How are you licensing that, right? So there's a really famous anecdote. Glenn Close, I think she had a small part in one of the Guardians of the Galaxy's movies. And they brought her in and they literally did a body scan head to toe. They did voice samples and everything. And she's like, are they going to call me back? Because they have basically me now, right? And that's going to be up to the agents to sort that out in the contracts and make sure that the talent is covered. And if you are going to get likeness rights, that there's going to be a royalty back to the talent for that right? So it's all solvable, right? It's not a thing that we can't figure out.
They're business issues, though. They're not technical issues.
Right, exactly. Mo Gaudat, who's from former Google, his quote that I like to throw out there a lot is, AI is a tool. It's not evil. It's not good. It's a tool, right? Where we have to worry about is how the producer who's going to try to weaponize it against talent, right? Or, people that are going to, steal other people's IP to cheat. That's what we have to worry about. Bad actors in the space, not the technology itself.
Tim, same area, like in responsible AI or ethical AI. What's coming up when you're looking at the tools?
100%. So I'm going to start on one side of things. We'll talk about training for a couple of seconds, and then I'll flip over to the other side when we're talking about intellectual property and what you can get out of prompts and things like that. So I'm on the let's see what happens kind of front. There's been two different papers that came out from the Copyright Office, specifically talking about intellectual property rights and copyright and around machine learning and AI algorithms. And there's going to be a third one. The third one will actually talk about what happens in the world of training. So right now we don't have very clear understanding what happens to training. And when we take, a bunch of photos that we've scraped off the internet, what are the intellectual property rights that are surrounding that? If we look at countries like South Korea and Japan and Germany, they've said that all of that is totally free to use inside of machine learning models. America, on the other hand, we don't know. So when that happens, then we'll know. But on the flip side of things, let's talk about intellectual property rights and copyright. And I'm going to take you all the way back to a gentleman, a monkey, and PETA. So there was a gentleman he was in Indonesia, and he had his camera. He was a British man. And he went ahead, and the monkey took his camera and took a photo of itself. He started going, that's a super cool photo. I'm going to go ahead and sell that online. He did. Now, PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, went ahead and said, that is exploitation. You cannot exploit that monkey. That is a horrible thing. Do not do that. Gets all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says it's a monkey. Monkeys don't have human rights. They don't have the ability to copyright things. And so we have that as the core of our intellectual property. And we have seen this time and time and time again, that if you place in just text into a prompt and you get out something, there is no copyright on those assets. What's even more terrifying is there's no clarity at this point in time. If I take an image, say, of some very well-known intellectual property, and I put it into a machine learning algorithm, even if it's a LoRa, which means I've trained it on my own images, or I've done a fine tune on it on my own images, there's no idea as to what comes out if that contains or maintains copyright, or if we have things like IP washing that happens. And so ETC, I'm working with them right now on 8 and 9 to try to figure out, got Eric here in the front, very specifically on trying to figure out intellectual property around those original props pieces, and then of course the individual shot level. Because right now we have a pretty clear understanding from Zahara of the Dawn that if you take an entire compendium of an asset, that will get copyright, but the individual frames didn't get copyright. So in this case, the analogous would be something like the individual shots won't get that. And then that same thing, if we have a table, a chair, or something like that that's been done, what's the copyright on that? At this point in time, the only thing we know is it has to show human intent and intervention. And there's been one test that someone did where they went ahead and they took a whole bunch of outputs, did a whole bunch of Photoshop work, put it together, and then the Copyright Office went ahead and gave that to them. But it wasn't really on the AI part of it. It's on the human interaction of the Photoshop move. So at this point in time, what's copyright?
Yeah, well, and that is the area, and that was something we talked a lot about yesterday in one of my panels, where effectively the takeaway was keep your receipts, because you're going to have to be able to prove, in order to get a copyright, how much human interaction there was. And there may be a point in time where there's a required certain amount of human interaction percentage that will determine whether something is copyrightable or not. And you mentioned Zahara, which came up yesterday as well. For those who aren't familiar, it was a book that came out that the author then very proudly and excitedly said, oh, this was all completely done with generative AI. And the Copyright Office called them and was like, wait, you can't copyright that, then we're going to revoke this. And they had to go through a process where they effectively showed all the prompting and the elements that were used to create that document. And they were ultimately given the copyright, but the copyright was not on the book. It was on the human interactions around the book at the end of the day. So this is an area that is like literally quicksand right now. It is changing constantly. And so it's an area you have to stay educated on, because it's going to update almost as fast as the technology. The technology will update faster, but the laws are going to change around this over the next couple of years pretty dramatically. And if you're in the content making business, you want to keep an eye on where it's going.
There's sort of a precedent when you think about sampling in music, and there's some legal precedent, but I don't think that's going to fully attach here either.
No, they're actually 2 weeks ago, there was they used it inside of training, and it was specifically on music. So at that point, it feels like music's a little further back, because we do have some precedent of they went ahead and they put it together with Photoshop on image world, but on music world, it's almost like a touch of tainted blood is the whole thing.
We have about 10 minutes left total. So I'm going to go ahead and, start asking you sort of your final thoughts, and then I'm going to give a little bit of time for questions. But instead of asking you what people should do, Mariana, what should they stop doing right now as it relates to AI? If there was a takeaway, what do you want someone to stop doing, in this moment?
They should stop fearing AI.
I think that's a good start.
It's not here to replace you. It's here to be your partner, your creative partner, your collaborator. It's here to help you out. So stop fearing it, and to stop blaming AI for everything, because it seems now that AI is to blame for everything that's wrong with the world. And guess what? It's horrible humans, not AI.
Yeah, sounds about right. Doug, same question.
I would stop consciously restricting yourself, right? This stuff is only going to get faster, smarter. It's going to be able to, the the idea is that it's already thinking about 150 IQ level. If you follow the Moore's law of AI, in a year, it's going to be thinking at a 300 IQ level, which no human being has ever thought at before, right? And a year after that, it's going to be, or 6 months after that, it's going to be 600 IQ. And so start thinking about asking the questions and letting the AI solve them for you. I think Tim was referring earlier, like the roadblock becomes us at some point, and we have to get out of our own way and ask the big questions and then let it figure it out, and then be the parent that kind of guides it back to where we need it to be.
Tim?
Yeah, I would go with stop using bad tools. There's a lot of really bad AI tools, and people just kind of get in this, it's good enough kind of feeling that's on it. There are new tools that are out there every day. Support those new tools. Make it to where people know, put your money where your mouth is, start pushing that forward, because then we're also all going to start coming better off, and we're going to have solutions that are just amazing. Because right now it's moving so fast, and it's so difficult to go ahead and monetize, because most of these companies are running on, let's be honest, GTP, they're in a giant red. They've been in red forever because they have all this investment money. And if we continue feeding into groups that are giving bad answers, the really good and amazing talent doesn't get a chance to kind of soar above.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I did want to we have about 8 or 9 minutes left. So if there are any questions, please raise your hand. We have a mic, and someone will come around to let you ask that question. I knew Fixer had a question.
Hi guys, thanks so much. What do you think next year's NAB, if you guys had the same panel, would be some of the things you guys would be talking about and thinking about?
I didn't see you do. I think we're going to start wrapping our heads around all the MCP stuff. I think we're really going to be able to make it to where everyone's going to be able to make the tools. And as much as everybody's afraid as artists that they're going to lose their work, I don't know. I'm a developer. My whole thing has been doing things in coding and things like that. Being able to put this in the hands of everyone, though, I think is kind of the best thing. And so those little tools, those easy tools and those things like that, an artist can have a little UI and pop it open and be like, I got this. And then, the big stuff that comes back to me. Still have fun with that.
I would say, talking about because right now there are projects that are being done, or little short films that are being done, but it feels like the very early stages of a new wave of storytelling, of content creation. Next time maybe talking about a project where all of these tools integrated into an actual pipeline, deployed at scale, with some of the legal and ethical issues solved, but something that
No, I agree. I mean, I was going to
better quality.
Similar, the same thing. It's sort of like there will be more platforms and more orchestration of all of those various pieces work in conjunction so that you don't have to think about it. And the process goes away and you're just in the creative flow more and more.
I would say that it may not be in the next year, but it's going to be way sooner than we think. Someone's going to have an Oscar or a short in the Oscar race. That's going to be a small team, 2 or 3 people, and they're going to create the core content, and the tools are going to help them put it out into the world. There's going to be a real serious piece that everyone's going to be talking about that was largely built by a core team, a writer, an artist, a musician that own the IP, but then they're going to use the tools to produce something that gets Oscar buzz or gets dropped at Sundance or something like that. That's coming. It may not be in the next year, but it's going to come way sooner than we think it's going to come.
Hey guys, how do you evaluate or determine all these new tools, especially models, what they're going to do with your IP, how protected they're going to be? Do they have your methods?
We kind of lost you there a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it added bad actors and content.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So I think there's a lot of evaluation that has to go on. Anytime a new model comes out, one of the first things I start to look at is what's the training data? Is there ways to tell the provenance about it? If there's not, that becomes red flags in and of itself. More and more, we're going to get tooling that is going to be required. I think legally, possibly by policy, that will require them to disclose what the data training sets look like, where the provenance of them came from, what the authenticity of those are. And it's becoming extra important because now they're starting to train the models on their own output. And you get this recursive pattern with it then, so it becomes even more important.
I can definitely say there are some studios that as part of the process of having machine learning, have that already in there. So they are requesting provenance, they're requesting, where data came from and what models, what's being utilized. They're doing, full security checks on all of those and any containers or any work that's already on there. But when I would always, when it comes to content API related, sending any data, always err on the side of, if it doesn't have an on-prem solution at this point in time, it's very, 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 very difficult to believe that they have your best interest in heart. And so I am on if I can't have it on-prem, I'm not going to use it.
There are also, one other element that I would throw in is there are activists who are actively fighting against things like data scraping that we talked about earlier. There are watermarks that they can put into images that go out there that if it is scraped and put into the training set, it corrupts the training set and destroys the work that's been done to that model to date. So people are fighting it back against it already, and we're probably going to see more of that starting to occur. Sorry, Doug, I cut you.
I was just going to say the best way to fight against bad actors is to make a very conscious decision to be a good actor. So to Tim's point, bring it in-house, right? Build your own systems, get smart people to help you build those systems, train. The very first project I did with ChatGPT, I was working as a creative director, and I was primarily responsible for every outbound communication about our products. And I had written hundreds and hundreds of pages about the product and had written the product manager or the product guide. And I fed that all back in. It was all my writing, right? And I was writing the drafts, and then I would go back and say, I need a press release about this feature. Give me it knew my style. So I knew that everything that was going out was my work, built on my work. And then I revised it and got to a final cut that I was happy with. So the best way to avoid bad actors is to be a good actor, a very conscious, thoughtful, intentional good actor yourself. And the rest, I think, will probably take care of itself.
One thing to add on top of that before we move on is, remember, when you're dealing with a repo, just because it's open source doesn't mean it's open license.
Right.
Pay attention to licenses, people. MIT is a really good one. It means you can do a lot of stuff with it. If you don't know what it is, you can put it into a system. You can also just say explained at the end of whatever license is. That way you can understand how it can be used. Okay. And then there was a little more feedback and how you can utilize it, because it's very important to do that. Because if you don't, then you're infringing on somebody else's intellectual property.
Chetan, you had a question? So that's a great question. And I do think it's critical. And I look back, like I compare it to, when I was in film school, and, there were no encoding tools. And so encoding was simply a thing you had to go off and learn. If the Doom 9 forums hadn't existed, I wouldn't know how to be an encoder today. But AI, there's a lot of documentation out there, and we need to get it integrated into curriculums. It's super critical right now, even if it's the baby steps of just starting it, because everybody is going to be using it. And I'm not just saying in media. I mean, all walks of life. It's going to be everywhere. So we need to have literacy in that AI knowledge so that people don't make the common mistakes or the pieces. Like, it becomes easier the more educated you are about this to both feel comfortable about it, but then also understand the elements to avoid. I sit on the board of the Seattle Film Institute, and I've been pushing them heavily to bring more AI into the work that they're doing in each of the classes. At least a couple of weeks of, this is the impacts that we are seeing, and this is the way that we need to be thinking about it, even if that's just an early start for it.
Yeah, and I would say, like, speed is the name of the essence of the essence here, because unfortunately academia takes way too long to make a decision, way too long to create a curriculum, way too long to decide, what they're going to do and how they're going to move forward. And like, at this point in time, you can't afford to do that. Like, AI should be, being taught since elementary school right now, yes, absolutely. Because the kids know how to use those, like they have everything on the phone. So you have to have like teachers that know exactly what's, the ethical, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I would say like just have speed is of the essence in every aspect from K to 12 and beyond.
Yeah. But I'm going to let Mariana have the final word there because we are at time, but thank you so much for attending. Great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.